On today's World Insight with Tian Wei, big defeat over the Brexit deal. What now for Mrs. May?
And that is something that this government will not do.
And France's national grand debate, could it appease the yellowvests? Hello and welcome to World Insight with me, Tian Wei. The program is coming to you live from Beijing on CGTN. On Tuesday, the British Parliament rejected British Prime Minister Theresa May's EU-supported Brexit deal. The defeat was anticipated, but the scale still surprised many. It was the biggest margin of loss in recent British history. Mrs. May is facing another leadership challenge on Wednesday. Britain is 72 days away from the European Union exit, and still no one really knows what will happen on March the 29th, which is the deadline.
Another day, a Brexit deal defeat, the same stalemate. British lawmakers seem to agree on nothing except for their rejection of Mrs. May's deal approved by the EU last November.
Noes to the left.
By a vote of 432 to 202, the margin set a new record in the House of Commons' recent history. Mrs. May's Tuesday defeat has been labelled as epic and humiliating, and it's hard to imagine anyone wanting to be in her seat.
But given...
Except maybe the opposition leader, Jeremy Corbyn.
I have now tabled a motion of no confidence in this government.
Mrs. May says she has not given up the fight.
To those who fear that the government's strategy is to run down the clock to the 29th of March. That is not our strategy.
Internally, neither hard Brexiteers nor Remainers would budge. Externally, the EU has repeatedly said that it would not renegotiate with the UK. So what's next?
I think it's going to be obviously a no-deal exit.
I think the deal is absolutely dead.
She was a Remainer at heart, and I think that's been the trouble from day one.
We're not leaving the European Union.
How can another vote be undemocratic?
I've just heard too much about it, so you lose interest.
If I could wake up tomorrow and it was all over, I'd be very happy.
Don't know what's happening. That's worse than almost anything else.
It has been more than 2 years since the Brexit train departed. No one seems to know where it is going, nor when it will reach the destination. But one thing's obvious, all passengers are getting tired of the ride.
For more on Brexit, we are joined in London by Professor Ian Begg from the European Institute. He's also the co-director of the Darendorf Forum of the London School of Economics and Political Science. In Berlin, we invited Dr. Matteo Ravavolia, who is a research associate at the Department of Politics and International Relations with the University of Oxford. In our Beijing studio, Cui Hongjian, director of the Department of European Studies from the China Institute of International Studies. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. Chaos, further chaos, and more chaos. Professor Begg, you are usually the one who would identify the trend out of the chaotic and entangled situation. So help us to understand what exactly is it now, the bottom line.
Well, the difficulty is that Theresa May's withdrawal deal is not supported by her own party. It's not supported by the collective of the House of Commons. It has a very low popularity rating among citizens. It's dead. There's no way that she's going to get the withdrawal deal she's negotiated with Brussels through the British political process. And part of the reason for that is that she insisted on certain features at the beginning of the process, what we call red lines. All these red lines made the scope for getting a deal pretty narrow, and the result is the deal that's on the table, which, as I say, nobody in the UK in the end is going to support. We therefore have to try to find a political process through which we arrive at something different, and that's what all the machinations going on behind me in the House of Commons are about in this week and later going into next week, as they try to work out a way of dealing with this unbelievable chaos.
The House of Commons right now is having the highest rating ever, I guess, for recent decades so far. But Mr. Garavaglia, let me go to you. You know, from the other Europeans' perspective, while the EU is still looking at the UK as part of it so far, what do you make of the current drama that is going on right now there?
In many respects, I believe that the ball is still in the UK's corner. When you look at it from Berlin, from Brussels, from across the Channel, it looks like there's a lot of chaos in London, and everybody else across Europe is waiting to see what London actually wants. In many respects, the European Union does not and will not budge on two accounts. First of all, there's certainly more interest among stakeholders, and I'm talking about business leaders, for instance, in Germany. There's certainly much more interest in preserving the key features of the European common market than cutting a special deal just for the UK. Between the two, people will always choose to protect the single market. And the second issue, it's one that has to do just with size. If you look at the population of the European Union minus the UK, we're talking about 446 million people. The UK has a population of 66 million people. When we look at GDP, we're talking about $16.5 trillion, the European Union minus the UK, while the UK has a GDP of $2.6 trillion US dollars. Who do you think is going to call the shots?
Well, there are two things going on there, right? I mean, for the one thing is, well, since the UK is already leaving, so the EU wants to take good care of the Republic of Ireland rather than the Northern Ireland, which is part of the UK when it's leaving the EU. And then there's also the issue of the single market, as you mentioned, sir. So with all these chaos going on, what could be some of the options? This is really fascinating. A lot of options. Listen to this. With Mrs. May's Brexit deal soundly defeated, she has at least 4 likely options, according to the British media. 1, a likely no-deal Brexit. 2, renegotiations, but the EU said it was only open to clarifications and ruled out substantial changes to the deal. 3, the second referendum, but Mrs. May herself hates that so far, I have to say. And 4, she could ask the EU to give her more time beyond the March the 29th exit. And of course, there's another option, Mr. Cui, that is, well, will she still be the Prime Minister of the UK, and therefore does she still need to worry about all these options? Mr. Cui.
Yes, certainly. I think that now the Brexit process, not only the job for Prime Minister Theresa May, and also I think the big job for the Conservative Party. And of course, at the same time, if we look at these maybe the possible scenarios for this the current situation, maybe there will be some no-deal Brexit or some kind of second referendum or some other. But now the question is, now the Brexit process itself now connected with this political situation and political stability of UK already, because just like Prime Minister May stressed, once there is a second referendum or some more split of the public opinion in UK, maybe the worst situation for Brexit would be that disappearance of the United Kingdom.
Okay, we'll see. But Professor Beck, the bottom line really is, if you see all this chaos going on, and the debate, and the referendum, and also the vote and no vote, a lot of it has to do with whether this Prime Minister will be still in the office. She will still be the Prime Minister. But that is exactly off the target from the original question. The original question is the Brexit deal and how that deal will be done. And now there's so much attention being devoted to this Prime Minister. She will be in or out, and why she should be in and why she should be out. It's really off the target. Is it really helping with the whole process, Professor Begg?
Well, it is in one sense, because what's going on, in addition to the whole debate about what form of relationship with the European Union the UK has in future, and you notice my careful choice of words there, because one option is to remain inside the European Union. What's going on is a power struggle between the government, and particularly Theresa May's faction of the government, which in some cases is only her, against the House of Commons, the executive against the legislature. What's happened over the last week or two is that the members of Parliament have themselves tried to advance the agenda, and much of what's being discussed today around this no confidence vote is whether Parliament should somehow take control of the process in a way which tries to assemble a majority for something on which Parliament collectively can agree. Now that might be one of the other options that you didn't mention in your list, such as something similar to the relationship Norway has with the EU. It might be to say, we, Parliament, cannot decide, therefore we have to put forward legislation to have a second referendum, and I stress that it requires new legislation. Something is going to happen to break this logjam, and I think Parliament, in the end, is going to take control, and that sidelines Theresa May.
I know, Professor Beck, you're going to create more options for us in this debate, as you just did, sir. So good for you. But I have to go to you, Mr. Garavaglia. I mean, this is maybe not necessarily a beautiful stress test, but certainly it is an absolute stress test of the so-called British democracy. You see one tool after another, one event after another being invented during this process. But at the end of the day, it's not about a test of democracy. It's about a test about what kind of future does Britain want for themselves, for itself, and also how it will relate to a much bigger bloc, which is the European Union. You were actually indicating very clearly, sir, earlier that, okay, this is what the British need to tell us what they want, and you're shining away from what the EU wants to happen next. Is the EU secretively happy in a way to see that the Brits are totally struggling among themselves as they are trying to, as earlier pledged, to leave the EU?
No, I don't think that there's any Schadenfreude across the channel. I think most Europeans
are generally sorry. Is that a politically correct statement, or this is really what you're feeling academically as well?
No.
There we go, sir.
No. That's what I believe. That's what I believe, absolutely. I think people across the channel were generally sorry about the result of the referendum. Having said that, there's a couple of other things that we should be aware of. One, this is turning out to be possibly the best PR campaign the European Union might have possibly wished for. If you look at opinion polls, for instance, in Germany, they indicate that the German citizens have never been so favorable to membership of the European Union over the last 25 years. All over Europe, people are looking at what's going on in the UK and say, well, we don't want to be in that situation. So certainly there's a silver lining in that respect. Having said that, what the European Union would like to have is the closest possible relationship with the UK, which is membership of the European Union. Failing that, of course, a Norway-style agreement, that would be something that the European Union would love to have, because in that respect, the United Kingdom will become pretty much a rule taker, and stay within the common market de facto, and have to take on board the rules that Brussels makes. I think that is unlikely to happen for a number of reasons. But ultimately, we would like to be as close as possible to the UK, but it seems that the problem really is not in Brussels, it's in London. The UK has to tell the rest of the world what it wants, and I don't think the UK has made up its mind.
No, it seems that it hasn't got the conclusion as to what it wants, even though there was a referendum about apparently what it wants. Mr. Cui.
Yes, I think now the gaming, I mean, in UK about this Brexit. Now, I think if we look at this result of the first referendum 2 years ago, it looks like one part of people to be against another. But now the big question is, how could those politicians in UK to understand really about the
what exactly
President from
yes, exactly.
Yeah. The second issue, I think, even now, if we look at a poll or survey happened in UK, yes, now it looks like there are more people they are in favor of the membership of UK in European Union. But now the question is, how about the gap between the pro and also against the EU? Once there are some maybe new referendum, I don't know, there will be a real reflection of the public opinion and especially their understanding. But of course, another big issue is how about the situation of the European Union itself? Because if we, take a conclusion that the first choice by UK people to leave from the European Union is because at that time there were a lot of problems in European Union, and most of the British people, they are not satisfied with this situation of European Union.
But now it seems the other way around.
Yes, but now I think this situation is keep going on this year or next year still.
But you know, Mr. Cui, and also the other two gentlemen, what we are seeing now in the UK probably is the crystallization of the stress that we are seeing with some of the recent so-called political ideas that appeared in the rest of the world as well. For example, Brexit, for example, protectionism. Professor Begg, remember a lot of people that were advocating Brexit, they were promising the British people a lot of things as a result of the possibility of Brexit. But now there seems to be even this process of doing the Brexit already giving a big dampening effect to both the national economy and certainly to the society as well. So the question is, are those promises, can those promises endure tests? I'm not just saying Brexit. I'm also saying, for example, protectionism measures. For example, the advocates of saying, let's close the border. For example, the one that are saying, let's decouple our economies. For example, those are saying, let's just throw away the international institutions and the regional platform. So there are a lot of empty promises already being made, and now this is the first test, not even beginning. We are seeing so much already.
Well, several points in answer to that. The first is that a referendum is a very blunt instrument. It gives you a yes-no choice, or in this case, leave-remain choice. It doesn't go into the detail. So it's very difficult to interpret what a population is voting for when it says yes or no in a referendum. What's become very clear is that many of the promises made during the referendum campaign by the Leave side were, at best, I put it politely, misleading and sometimes outright lies. There was also on the Remain side promises of dire economic consequences if things weren't accepted. That too has proved to be misleading. And what's really causing all the struggle that we read about now is that when you get into the detail of leaving the European Union or staying in the European Union or constructing a new model with the European Union, you realize it's far more difficult than the simple black and white picture that you get in a referendum. I think I've used before the expression from a Sherlock Holmes novel. When we look at the outcomes, he says to Watson in one of the novels, once you've eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. And I think what we're now doing is searching for the improbable and at the same time eliminating the impossible. If you want my view on it, I think this has to be my last word today because I need to go shortly.
I know, sir, you have to go and throw yourself into the fluid situation that is going on right into the streets of London.
Exactly. But I think my last word on this is I think the improbable outcome we're now heading towards is a second referendum. Quite how we get there is going to be extremely complicated because it's procedurally and legally difficult to arrive at. But that's in my judgment, the way the politics is heading.
Thank
so I hope the rest of the program goes well.
Professor Begg, I hope you have good luck today, also doing more research about that. Thank you. And let's continue our discussion. I want to go to Mr. Garavolia also about that. What about those things that's happening politically worldwide, whether it's Brexit, whether it's protectionism, whether it is let's just decoupling, let's just throw away the international institutions. Those that are advocating this, do they know what they are talking about? Certainly what's going on right now in the UK is already a test of it.
I would argue clearly a lot of people had no idea what they were talking about, otherwise we wouldn't be in the mess we're in right now. Having said that, you know, a key trait of populism is to give simple answers to complex problems. That's what, and that in that respect, Professor Begg is absolutely right. A referendum is an extremely blunt, cross instrument. It tells you in or out, black or white, and the world very often is not black or white. On that question, we might want to bring in a greater degree, maybe of sophistication. If we are to go towards a new referendum, as might be the case, well, maybe that would be important to think of a referendum that doesn't pose an in-out question, but rather a set of possible outcomes. One that would say in, out, or outside the European Union, but within a common market, a customs union, for instance. So as to try to break the deadlock and provide a number of variables upon which citizens can express themselves and somehow make a decision, promote their own interests. Because this in or out, I mean, my fear is that we'll have another referendum. The result might swing the other way around by 2-3 percentage points.
Right.
But again, is that enough to say, well, sorry, it was all a mistake, we stay in? I'm not sure.
And who's going to be responsible for that, really, eventually? Mr. Cui, also your comment about the same question.
Yes, as now I think the question now, well, the real issue is a political issue and a political struggle between the different parties in the parliament, especially take the parliament as a battlefield. Is going to beyond the Brexit issue itself. Because now the big question for the Brexit process is there is no consensus from all of the parties in British politics about what's the real national interests for UK. Now it looks like that every party, even every politician, they try to, raise some issue and to ask the national interests and so on. Especially, I think now, if we look at this the result of the vote in the Parliament, we can find out a very, very bad question, bad situation for UK politics. Right. It's about the polarization of the politics.
The polarization already happening before the Brexit. That's why there is also a big debate about Brexit itself, but certainly further of the polarization of the politics. What would that mean? It's still a big question to be answered. Before we go, gentlemen, both of you, I would like to have both of you shed some light for us as to what are some of the next steps to be watched out so that we have a better idea as to where the UK is heading for and what does Brexit eventually would mean for all of us. Let's go to Mr. Cui very briefly.
Yeah, I think it very big depends on the result of the no confidence vote. This evening.
Well, this is not the first time for the Prime Minister, is it?
Once it happens, I mean, the government will go through this vote. Will be okay, which means that the Brexit process will go back to the current situation, which means that there will be more, I mean, bargaining between UK and the EU. But of course, I think the big consequences is the deadline in March.
March 29th, of course, that deadline could also be pushed further into the summer. Before we go, Garavoglia, Mr. Garavoglia, your final thoughts.
On that deadline, I think to significant, to extend the 29th of March deadline, the government of the United Kingdom has to ask the European Union to extend that deadline. First of all, we have to see if that will happen, because Theresa May said multiple times she doesn't want to extend the deadline. Let's see if she does it or not. If she does it, we need to have the European Union to agree to extend the deadline. And I believe the European Union will agree to extend the deadline only under certain specific conditions. A, if there were to be a need to extend the deadline because a new election were to take place. Or B, if there was a need to extend the deadline because a new referendum were to take place. But the European Union won't extend that deadline just to keep talking and talking and talking, as we've been doing for a couple of years by now.
Wow. A lot of stories to come, that's for certain. For now, thank you so much to both of you, Matteo Garavoglia and also Cui Hongji. And we would like to express our appreciation to earlier the comments from Professor Ian Begg as well. Thank you. Stay with us here on World Insight with me, Tian Wei. Still to come on our program today. France, national grand debate. Could it appease the yellow vests? That's up for a discussion right after this break. Welcome back. You're still watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei. Let's turn to Another European country on the verge of what some believe as chaos. French President Emmanuel Macron has set off a 3-month national debate during a meeting with about 600 mayors and local officials in Normandy. What he called a grand debate will take place through local meetings and on the internet, focusing on taxes, public services, climate change, and democracy. President Macron, whose popularity ratings hit record lows at the end of last year, hopes the process will appease the Yellow Vest movement. The anti-government protest went on its 9th straight weekend as thousands of protesters took to the streets. Repeated clashes broke out between the protesters and the police. The movement began over a fuel tax rise last November, but quickly expanded to become a wholesale rejection to Mr. Macron's economic policies.
Il faut refuser la violence, parce qu'il ne sort rien de la violence.
We must not give in to violence, because nothing comes out of violence. We mustn't engage in demagoguery, because adding anger to the debate has never been a solution. But we must build the means to find solutions for the country.
So how could Mr. Macron's peace offering to the people go? Let's turn to our panelists to find out. In Paris, we have Joe Rouet, who is the chairman of the Bridge Tank. Also in Paris, we have Alexei Poulain, who is the co-founder of Le Monde Modern. And also in our Beijing studio, Cui Hongjian, once again, director of the Department of European Studies with China Institute of International Studies. Gentlemen, welcome. So, shall we have the two French panelists helping us to understand your perspective of the realities on the ground? Mr. Rouet first. What's next?
Tianwei, good evening. You mentioned about chaos, you mentioned about debate. I hope debate is not leading to chaos. I think what's next is a real sound debate. And it's only the second act of the revolution launched by Mr. Macron. When he won the election, he destroyed the parties. The people in the street, they voted to reinforce for destroying the parties. They did not want to be recuperated by the parties.
Okay.
Now we'll have a real debate because we need to invent new forms of democracy, new mediums, new institutions. That's the
there's a lot of hope being pinned on to those so-called national debate and great debate. As you may know, the debate could play on for quite some time. Mr. Poulain, your thoughts?
I don't think it will be a real debate. I think what we've heard from the majority is that the question have been asked by the President, and the answer will be only for the question asked by the President, not really by the question asked for the French people. It looks more like a new campaign in light of the European election coming in May, rather than a real need of debate or a real open debate. The questions, and you have red lines about ISF, about taxes, and clearly the policy of Emmanuel Macron won't change after the debate. There might be some cosmetic changes, but the core of Emmanuel Macron policy is to be a liberal in France and to try to make sure that there is more debt market and put people in difficult position, in more difficult position. And if you hear him talking, it's always the fault of the poor, the fact that they're in this situation. So it looks like a political campaign more than a debate.
Mr. Cui, of course, when the President Macron proposed this grand debate, at least two things can be achieved. One is to let people have their air out. At least there's a debate, right? They were complaining there's no debate, and the President was saying everything, and therefore put into the policy. Now there is a debate. Secondly, this is also, in a way, responding to people's accusation that the President is leading the country to nowhere without the input of the people. And now there is the input of the people. But a debate is a debate. It's not a policy-making process. So, Mr. Cui, once again, what's next?
Yes, I think firstly, there will be a debate in French society. I think it could be better than there is no ending debate, because I think that the major purpose from the government, from President Macron, is try to do something to help.
Well, you could say the French are debating anyway.
Yes, and also I think of course, it's a kind of a reaction from the government and President Macron towards this yellow vest movement.
Yeah.
Because once there will be some more movement in the street, it will be, I mean, very, very bad for this reform agenda for the government. But of course, I think now the question is how about the censoring this from the government, from President Macron, just like our French guest mentioned that there should be a real and a two-way debate between the people and the government.
Well, you're talking about the election now. Yes. It seems that, Mr. Cui, that's
but otherwise, I think there will be some, maybe, it would be another kind of stimulation for more and more movement in the street.
I understand that, Mr. Pouet, for the French tradition, what's happening in the streets is very much likely to be reflected eventually and quickly into the national politics. But on the other hand, how much of the resentment being expressed by a few thousand people or maybe 10,000 people, 20,000 people into the streets reflecting the national picture, it could be a question mark, and therefore how much attention they should get, and also how much adjustment of the policies eventually already being implemented should be readjusted. That's also a very interesting question, isn't it, Mr. Jouet? Now when you think about it.
No, I agree with what was said. There is a risk it's a kind of political campaign before the European election, and this will partly be. But if Emmanuel Macron and if the government don't listen, this will not be sustainable. So I think sooner or later they will have to listen, and they will listen. And Tianwei, as you mentioned very rightly, you know, Frank, some part of what is expressed in the street will percolate into the reforms. Now I think that this organized debate, it's not just a debate, it's an organized debate, will allow to separate what has no legitimacy in the claims of the street with what has legitimacy in the claims of the street. And I think this is a process where everyone has to be cautious, but this will be a progressive process.
All right, let's take a look at what Mr. Macron has been proposing. In Mr. Macron's address recently, he insisted that France is a country where solidarity exists. In his consultations, he asked whether there were public services that should be abolished because they are not cost-effective. Macron also has pointed out to high-speed trains, mostly free education, subsidized health care, and excellent infrastructure at France, taxes at work. To a certain extent, I have to say to our panelists, Mr. Boulin, what he said, the president said, it's true that he does have a grand blueprint for your country, France, and yet is it a communication issue, or is the president too wishful thinking based on what the current realities are in France?
I think it's true that we have a social security system. We have a lot of things in France that works well, and apparently it costs a lot of money and too much money because of the tax burden. So the question is, where do you get the money to fund these social services? And this question isn't asked by President Macron. The first question is, which social services, which public services should we cut because we don't have the money? It's not the question of where should we get the money, because there is a lot of money in tax evasion. There is a lot of money to just reinvent and reinvest in a transition measure for the green economy, but also to make sure that our public services work well. Why is Emmanuel Macron selling energy, hydro energy assets of France, or privatizing Aéroport de Paris, the Parisian airport? What is the sense of privatization? It's short-term money for the state budget, because France, of course, has a big debt and a small budget. But the question is, why can't we find out social and tax justice so that the state works and has the means to function well?
Okay. I don't want to use that word, but really it is all about that. It's money, money, and money. So, Mr. Cui, the nature of this debate, I guess we come to a very solemn point. That is, where does the money come from? We repeated that debate many times, and France also on a daily basis, I guess, right now. But to what extent is the issue of money relevant? Is this about money issue, or is this about vision issue, or is this about whether France will come to a consensus about what kind of country its people want?
I think both of them, or all of them, will be a big issue.
You're making things so complicated, Mr.
Yes,
Cui, I have to say.
Exactly. Because also, firstly, yes, regarding to the money issue, yes, just like our French guest mentioned that still there are a lot of the financial restriction for French government to do something, because now once there are some more investment from government in some reform, certainly there will be a bigger question for the French government. Secondly, I think maybe another big issue is once there is money, but where is the money from, and where is the money go? I think that would be a very big concern, especially from average people, because if we look at this origin of the movement, we can find out people were wondering that how could you take some more tax from average people? Why doesn't the government to take some more money from the rich people? And then for the new energy, for the climate change issue, for average people, they could not have so broad vision about the climate change issue itself. They just want to know that, okay, how could I spend less once we could not get some more, better situation?
That's right. This is what I really want to ask, following all of your insights, gentlemen. What exactly is the nature of this debate? What exactly is the nature of this apparent crisis in President Macron's term? Is it about the art or sufficient amount of art of communication? Or is it about a country which is very divided and certainly also has enormous wealth gap? And if that is so, is there a plan at all, short term? And thirdly, if France is getting into such a big trouble, we look at the overall European situation, how will this case study set a precedent for the other countries and economies which might have different degrees of similar problems? Let's go to Mr. Boulogne first. If you could be brief, different from the French tradition, because we're running out of time. So let me have 1 minute insight from you, sir. Mr. Boulogne?
Okay, I think this crisis is not the sole responsibility of Emmanuel Macron. It's been years of management, of political leadership in France, where the policies always been in the same direction. And we have also an issue about the EU and the fact that we can't go over 3% of debts in the state budget, which of course makes things difficult to run a state. But the main question, and it's everywhere the same question, is the fact that big countries are divided between the one who have and the one who have nots. Right. And so far the one who have nots are visible and they are protesting or they are voting in our democracies. So that's where the crisis comes from, is that so far the have-not could believe in progress, could believe that there would be a change in the future. It's not the case anymore. All
right, Mr. Cui, you also have fairly only 1 minute and less.
Yes, I think maybe the purpose from President Macron tried to deal with the issue of so-called democratic deficit now in a French society. But now I'm afraid that how about the approach of this debate we'll have. Once there is not a two-way or open debate happened, I'm afraid that the final outcomes will be strengthen the impression from average people about the image of the current French government, and especially President Macron himself as the representative of elite, of the rich people. Once it happens, I think there will be a failure of this debate.
All right, last but certainly not least, Mr. Rouet, also 1 minute, if you can, sir.
Yeah, Tianwei, you mentioned about money. I don't think it's the point. I think it's budget. National budget, household budget. National budget is about making choices, collective choices. No country in the world can make everything. We have to choose. Now we have to make a new collective vision. That's one part of the debate. On the households, I would not say you have the have-nots. You have rather what remains after you've paid all the compulsory taxes, which is the amount of freedom you keep out of your money. And then it's about negotiating that. That's the other part of the budget, of the debate. And that's again a part of choice. So, you know, it's choice for the elites and the government, choice for the have-nots or the people. It's about choice, so it's about debate. And you see the French can be short sometimes.
Well, they're not short of anything in that sense, the two things you just mentioned. For now, I want to thank the three of you, gentlemen, for helping us understand all the latest of what's going on in France and the nature of the real debate. Cui Hongjian, Joe Ruet, Alexis Poulin, really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And that is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, try to find us World Insight, CGTN, into your search engine, or check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Sina Weibo. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone on the World Insight team, thanks for watching. Tune in again next time for insights across China and around the world. Good night.